So I want to just make sure. Okay. So all the unit number 2 activities, both chapters, everything will be due in like 2 weeks, which will be on February 13th. Again, don't do that in the unit 2, what some of you did in the unit 1, that waiting till the last day to start working on things. So that's 400 points, by the way. So do not jeopardize yourself that much as early in the semester. Anyway, so hopefully you will work a little bit better in the unit number 2. For those of you who did not do it in a timely fashion in the unit 1, so that you space out for yourself. I mean, like, there's no point of putting yourself under pressure. Um, anyway, so let's see. Okay, so we have now Greg and Tatiana. Okay, so the only person we are missing right now is Santos, that we don't know. Okay.
Greg will be joining you soon. He passed out.
Who?
Greg.
I'm already here, Jared.
Oh, he's in here. Okay.
You okay, Greg?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
no problem.
No, I was doing a lot of stuff this morning, and then I lay down at 11 o'clock, and I ended up falling asleep, and then I just woke up.
Yeah, that's what I was telling everybody, that usually if you had to miss out, you always email and let me know ahead of time. So I was like, I hope everything is okay. But I didn't hear anything from you and you were not here either. So that's all good. Okay, so let me share my screen. As we walk into chapter number 3. That is another chapter in the phase number 1, which talks about systems planning, or managing systems project is our main focus for this week. So in this chapter, we will be focusing on the following 10 items. We will be looking at a triangle, which basically is the bread and butter of project management. So as I told you in week 1, that there are certain chapters in this book which are purely project management chapters. And this is one of those chapters. But there are other chapters which are about software development life cycle. Because project management is only looking at managing the project. How can I make the project a success? It just revolves around those ideas. What are the components that I need to monitor and maintain and manage while running a project? On the other hand, the software development life cycle goes through the entire development's life cycle. So it has a slightly different take on just managing a unit or just managing a project. So project management or managing systems project revolves around these ideas. You need to be aware of that triangle that we will look into, the first thing. Then we will look at what is involved in the project in terms of its planning, scheduling, monitoring, and reporting. Then we will learn about the WBS, which is work breakdown structure. What is it? Then we'll be looking at what are tasks, And how do we divide them up? How do we build pattern in the tasks? Then going into the critical path, which is then based on those patterns that you develop. Moving on to project monitoring and controlling techniques, to how project status is reported, to describing the project management software and how it can be used, to risk management, and finally closing out with describing why projects sometimes fail. Okay, so that's basically what we will be revolving around in this chapter. Starting out with the project management overview. So what exactly is a project management? Project management for IT professionals includes planning for the project, scheduling for the project, which means scheduling resources, which includes people and other resources, monitoring while the project is ongoing, and controlling the project and reporting on information system development. Who does a project management manager reports to? In some businesses, depending on the structure, for example, at Abbott Labs, for example, they have several project managers working under an IT manager who probably is working under a director. And the directors probably are working under a vice president. And there will be a vice president's group working under a senior vice president. And there'll be a collection of them that may be working under a CIO. I mean, as you can see, the tree grows bigger and bigger and bigger at big corporations because they're massive, massive. Like, for example, before the split of Abbott Park and Abbott Labs and Abway, Abbott Park even now is basically an entire zip code. Is that one company is entire zip code. That's it. That's how big it is. It's massive. So now it has more wings spread out around the Chicago Greaterland area. And even after a split, the company is massively huge. So running a project for these kind of companies require for you to go through a big hierarchy. So a project manager will break the project down into individual tasks, determine the order in which the tasks needs to be performed, figure out how long each task will take. And in order to make things easier for them to understand and comprehend, they will model things like they may be building charts like PERTs and CPM. And then you need to control the project, like in terms of you need to inform people through reporting or weekly scheduled meeting, or sometimes whatever is the update that your company follows. There has to be a risk management assessment done. All of these things are different components of your project management. What shapes a project? A successful project is a project that is completed on time, within the allocated budget, and delivers what was promised. That's it. Those are the three components. So if you look at your assignments, for example, and consider them as your project. So our time frame for you to turn in your assignments is what?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay. Now, in that 2 weeks, how many assignments are you working on?
2.
2. So that probably gives you an idea of working on multiple things on the same timeline. You could be working them on linear, or you could be working them on parallel. So somebody said, okay, I will wait till the week 4 chapter is done, and I will then utilize that week to work on 3 and 4 assignments. So you answered number 3 assignment, one of the questions, and you said, okay, how about I now concentrate a bit on number 4 because it's a bit fresh in my mind. So you probably completed 80% of number 4. And then you said, okay, how about I now spend a little bit time doing the project question in number 3. So you're working on 2 things in parallel versus working them in linear fashion. So you have a deadline to meet. Okay. You have already invested. That's your budget, right? Your budget is already in place. Quality of work. Okay. Are you rushing through stuff and just handing it over to get done with it? Or are you really spending time doing what you have been asked to do? They're two different things. I mean, I notice some people try to give me an answer as concise as possible. So if they think, oh, okay, so if I just write one word, they will just write one word. That's it. They make no more effort than they can. They don't put as much effort in place. On the contrary, there are people who would go above and beyond. So you can see when when I see the assignments that are done by some of the students, is like if they're giving me paragraphs, the paragraphs are created very professionally. They will indent the first line, for example. Okay. They will put effort in writing what has been asked. They may go beyond what is in the book and will come back and will give some other stuff outside. I mean, you can truly see the quality of work, and some are just trying to execute the bare minimum. And when you go for the bare minimum, you can make mistakes, and a slight mistake can throw you off because you're already delivering bare minimum. Similarly, when I ask, okay, visit so-and-so product and give me summary of what you have found, some people will just give me the link and maybe one sentence next to the link. Other will go and they will literally start putting in at least 4 or 5 lines because that whole product could not be just one line, right? So quality shows for itself. That you can see where the efforts have been placed and where the things are just done that because you have to do it. So that's another component of the project development life cycle. And I want all of you to give me more than the basic stuff. You know, I want to see that little effort on your part if you're doing just the basic stuff. Because I noticed that some assignments were not even well formatted. So those kind of things, you have to give a little bit of time to the activities that are assigned to you. So system developers can initiate a formal project as early as the preliminary investigation stage, which we learn about in chapter number 2. Or maybe later on, as analysis, design, and implementation activities occur. Systems development projects tend to be dynamic and challenging because if they're using an agile approach, they're constantly changing their approach. So the 3 components are what? Cost, time, and what? Oops. Cost, time, and quality. Yes. Okay. So these are the 3 words we use here: project cost, project scope, and project time. So quality includes that what you are delivering is basically what was even asked for, rather than you delivering something that is not even asked for. So first of all, the project has to be within the budget. And how many projects are within the budget? In real world, very few. Very few projects are really truly delivered within the budget. But there are some examples that happens that way too. So when it comes to project management, things are not quite so simple. Decisions do not need to be all or nothing, but recognize that any change in one leg of the triangle will affect the other 2 legs. Let me give you an example. Many years ago, it was not my team, it was the different team, and the project manager was very worried. In fact, it wasn't the project manager. It wasn't the project manager. It was the IT manager through which I learned about their project that he had a team of 6 developers. And within a month, 4 of them changed jobs. Out of 6 developers he had, he lost 4 of them in 1 month. That's a lot. They're like,
Why?
they found better opportunities. They changed and they moved to a different place. They just left the firm. It happens a lot in IT. You know, nobody tells you, oh, I'm changing jobs, by the way. Whatever is the minimum amount of time that they would have to give to the company, they will just notify them for, and then they'll just change jobs. People are looking for opportunities to move around in IT, and people do that. So it happened to be so that he lost so many developers in 1 month. So he was looking for what? Resources. Now, those developers were with the company for a long time, at least minimum 3 years to maximum 8. They had run so many projects under him and beyond him. So there was this wealth of knowledge. But where will you gonna now find resources? So, well, it happened to be so that he was in good relations with other project managers who allocated some of the hours of their team towards his project, where letting him hire some new people and giving him some time for the existing developers to train the incoming people in some hours. So the project went a little overboard, but he was helpless in that. So he had to work really hard to make sure that he has put himself back on track within X amount of weeks or whatever time frame was given to him. So things of that nature can happen. You can't control that. Now think about it like this, you know, I mean, like something happened and I couldn't come to work now, right? So think about the semester as a project where there's a cost involved, the time involved, and everything is involved in this whole process. So somebody has to make a decision to allocate the same resource to be able to deliver, or allocate other resources to be able to deliver. So those kind of things happen, like in a team, a main person in the team has to now undergo a surgery, for example, or goes on a medical leave, or it happened to be so that that's the time when he or she already placed a request with HR that I need to go on vacation. And that was already decided like probably last 6 months or so before this project even started. So now you're down by 1 team member for next 2 weeks. There are a lot of factors are in place there that you have to keep in mind. Now, I remember some of my friends who used to work for certain companies related to financials specifically. They usually wouldn't get any vacation in November and December while they are on the verge of closing their books. So, you know, there are some tight measures just so that you can still meet your deadlines. So cost,
Hey.
scope, and time are very important. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Saad, I just wanted to let you know I'm here. I'm sorry I was late. I had a family emergency I had to tend to.
Oh, okay. I hope everything is okay.
Yeah, everything got worked out now, so everything's good now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we updated the attendance sheet. Back to the project triangle. So this is the project triangle we have been talking about, the time, the cost, the scope. So here's an example author states, if an extremely time-critical project starts to slip, the project manager might have to trim some features, seek approval for a budget increase, add new personnel, or a combination of all 3 actions. So those are some plan of action the project manager has to execute. And it happens to be so that in some companies, project manager is not just overlooking one project, is overlooking several projects simultaneously. It has to maintain each one of them, and each one of them has a different time frame. Some of the projects share resources. Some of the projects even share the client, or maybe some of the projects share different divisions of the same client. And you realize that within the same company, there is such a wide variation that when you're doing work for one division versus another division, there is a big difference in personnel, people, approach, politics, resources, whatever. So again, in that role, you have to be a people's person. You have to be able to make decisions on the fly. You should be able to critically think and find solutions for the problem rather sitting on them. That's one of the worst things that you can do is sit on a problem and don't talk about it. Don't tell anybody that this is what I'm facing, and trying to tell. This is another problem I have seen, and I don't know, it could have something to do with different reasons. I don't want to talk about them here. Is that people think that if they tell the management everything is good, then they will have security for the job, or management will be happy with them. Even when conditions are worst, they don't tell the management until the water runs out of their head level, and now they are starting to complain that, oh my God, I can't do this. And then everybody looks at them and said, why didn't you tell us before? So there are certain mistakes some project managers make, or sometimes they're like, oh, I can handle this. Don't worry. I have handled similar situations before. And deep down, they know that this is something that is difficult for them to handle, or they probably might not be able to handle it just by themselves. Another example of this could be that now your current team doesn't get along. So that causes problems. When your team members are busy and not supporting each other or fighting with each other, there's this political stuff going on between the team members. They're trying to downplay each other, or whatever they had against each other in other places within the work, they have now brought that into the project, which affects the project's performance. So you're spending more time trying to negotiate and act like an intermediate person to bridge the gaps. That's an unnecessary stress too. And it shows pretty often that whatever you are saying, the other person will refuse all the time. But if somebody else says the same stuff, we'll accept it. That kind of crazy office politics. So all of these things are in whose plate? Project manager's plate, and has to allocate resources to make sure things are working the way they should continue to work. Let me give you a simple example of that in a classroom management. There were times when we would put people in groups to work on their final project. And here we go, one guy coming to us in our office hour complaining about, I don't want to work with so-and-so. Okay. And I'm like, okay, now let's look at it like this, that this is not classroom project. This is your real life project. Would you say the same thing to your project manager? I don't want to work with so-and-so. You'll never say that, because you know that what you are thinking, what they're thinking in your lives outside of the classroom should not affect the classroom. So there are conflicts of that reason, of those times where people don't realize that there is a difference between opinion, personalities, work ethics, project, personal life and professional life shouldn't get mixed up. Anyway, so there are different kind of challenges. Microsoft offers an interesting suggestion for project managers who have a project at risk. Find the stuck side of the triangle. That means the side which is giving you the most problem. Is it the scope that you did not define well enough? Is it the time that you may need more time than you anticipated? Or is it money that you may need more money than what originally was negotiated for? Because during the project, the labor cost went up, right? It's likelihood. You were thinking that all employees will be on this pay rate when the pay rate jumped by 3%. Or you had to end up buying new equipment in the middle of the project because your equipment that you had before was a bit faulty. Or was it in the end of its lifetime? Or you had to buy, or the licensing cost of the software increased during the course of the project. I mean, anything could affect the cost that you allocated initially to work on the project. Or a vendor went out of business. Now, let me give you one example that Honda Odyssey, it's a van that comes from Honda. For a number of years, they had this one feature that they added in the top of the line Honda Odyssey vans that you can get a vacuum cleaner right in the back. You had your own personal vacuum cleaner inside the car for vacuuming the car. But during the COVID years, the vacuum cleaning company went out of business. Now think about it, right? You have everything in place because you have the whole blueprint of the car done. You have been producing models, right? Everything you know, this is where the vacuum cleaner goes, and the company goes out of business. So you have to figure out, okay, how much vacuum do we have in stock? How many vacuums do we have in stock? Okay, you have, let's say, 1,000 of them. So, okay, let's produce 1,000 models with our vacuum, with the vacuum. But how about after that, in the meanwhile, we have to come up with some kind of a plan to replace that component with some other component. So whatever we produce after those 1,000 elite units, we'll have something else in that place, like maybe an open compartment. Maybe we're going to give them a little bit of storage there or something like that. So things of that nature. It could happen with any project. I'm just giving you one example. What does a project manager do? In a systems project, a project manager or a project leader usually is a senior systems analyst. So it's possible that systems analyst might work his or her way up to the project manager's role. Or it could be an IT department manager where there is not a fine line between IT manager and project manager. The IT manager could also be a project manager. An analyst or a programmer analyst might manage smaller projects. A project coordinator handles administrative responsibilities for the team and negotiates with users who might have conflicting requirements or want changes that would require additional time or expense. So project managers typically perform these 4 activities. They plan the project, which includes all the project tasks and estimating the completion time and cost for each of the steps. And this could only be done when they have a realistic approach towards the resources and they deeply, thoroughly understand each step. Then they need to schedule it in a timely fashion, allocating resources, business hours, everything else. And if the resources share between multiple projects, then the number of hours allocated to you even lessens up. Then they have to constantly monitor people's activities, constantly monitor it to make sure that things are happening the way they should be happening. If they are not, they have to take measures to make sure everybody is brought up to speed. And then they have to report about the project progress to management, maybe to client, maybe to other people involved. So their communication should be extremely effective, open, understandable. Now, how to create a work breakdown structure, how to identify task patterns, and how to calculate project's critical path. These are the next three topics to learn, which will tell you a little bit more about project manager's role. A work breakdown structure, which involves breaking a project down into a smaller tasks. Before creating a work breakdown structure, the two primary charts that should be understood are Gantt and PERT or CPM. Why PERT or CPM? Because these are two separate entities that merged over time. So let's look at Gantt chart. A Gantt chart named after Henry Gantt, a mechanical engineer and management consultant who developed this chart almost over 100 years ago or around 100 years ago. His goal was to design a chart that should show plan and actual progress on the project. So a Gantt chart is basically a horizontal bar chart that represents a set of tasks. For example, a Gantt chart that you see over here in figure 3-3, you can see that how this chart simply shows you the progress. Okay, task 1 starts on February 25th, goes all the way through March 14th, and then in parallel, task 2 will start somewhere in the beginning of March, and then task number 3 will start somewhere towards the middle of March, and like that. It just tells you the progress. Now, the yellow bar that you see within a blue bar is if it is in progress. It's not 100% done. We're still working on it. It shows the percentage of task completion. So we have completed 70% of the task. So the yellow bar will be across on the 70% mark. So a Gantt chart also can simplify a complex project by combining several activities into what we call task group that contains subsidiary tasks. So this is a screenshot of Microsoft Project window, okay, which is another Microsoft software. A Gantt chart can show task status by adding a contrasting color to the horizontal bars. For example, vertical red arrows marks the current date in figure 3-3 with a fixed reference point. So that's what basically, and at the top, you could just use different charting styles and things like that. Okay. Gantt charts can present an overview of the project status, but they do not provide enough detailed information, which is necessary when managing a complex project. Some projects managers may go towards PERT or CPM charts, where PERT stands for Program Evaluation Review Technique and CPM stands for Critical Path Method. PERT was developed by the US Navy to manage very complex projects, while CPM was developed by a private industry to meet similar project needs. So over the period of time, these two merged into one. So we now call them PERT/CPM. Or some people just call it PERT, some people just call it CPM. It means the same thing. It is a bottom-up technique because it analyzes a large complex project as a series of individual tasks. So have a look at here that your approach here in the PERT and CPM. So the top screen is what you see in the Gantt chart, right? Running across horizontal bars. Okay. The PERT chart is in the bottom. This is the PERT chart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when you look at these 5 tasks, you can see, okay, we will complete task number 1. Then task number 2 and 5 will run in parallel. 2, after completion, will fork into 3 and 4. 3 and 4 will run in parallel. And 6 cannot begin until 3, 4, and 5 are all completed, which will at some point in time will all run in parallel. Do you guys follow this PERT CPM approach? Okay.
It's a lot easier than those normalization charts.
And then here is a card to represent each one of these activities. So for example, task number 5, this is the name of the task, send out an interview schedule, where it starts on this date and ends on this date. This is the identification of the process, and this is the duration of the project. This will take 1 day to complete. So like that, each one of the tasks will be defined through some kind of a card. So although a Gantt chart offers a valuable snapshot overview of the project, PERTs are more useful for scheduling, monitoring, and controlling the actual work. With a PERT chart, a project manager can convert tasks, start and finish times to actual dates by laying out the entire project on a calendar. Then on any given day, the manager can compare what should be happening with what is actually taking place. In figure 3-4, it shows both kind of charts. The top one is Gantt with 6 tasks. The PERT chart below, it shows the same project using a separate box for each task instead of a horizontal bar. Okay. Before we go to, in fact, let's complete this too. A work breakdown structure, or WBS, must clearly identify each task and include its estimated completion time. A task, also called an activity, is any work that has a beginning and an end. That's it. That's the simplest thing, beginning and an end. And it requires company resources, which is inclusive of money, time, and people. Examples of tasks could include conducting interviews. So if you have to conduct an interview, that's a task. You need to give it a task ID. You need to give it a start date, end date. If you think that interviewing requires preparation and you want that to be separate from the interviewing process, then you will have a predecessor task called the prep interview. So you will have 2-3 days to prep for the interview, which includes allocating resources and people and all of that the stuff that you need to do. And then you have a week to do the interview. So between the two, you have 8 business days. Things of that nature. Similarly, other things like designing a report, selecting a software, and so on and so forth. In addition to tasks, every project has events or milestones. An event or a milestone is a recognizable reference point that can be used to monitor progress. For example, we should be done with the design by March 29th. So that's a milestone. That's not the complete project. So when that milestone is reached, then we move on to the next step. For example, an event might be the start of the user training, the conversion of system data, or the completion of interviews. A milestone, such as complete 50% of the program testing, would not be useful information unless it could be determined exactly when that event will occur. In figure 3-5, it shows tasks and events that might be involved in the creation, distribution, and tabulation of questionnaire. So first of all, you start working on the questionnaire. You prepare them. Then you need to get your questionnaire approved, and then you need to distribute the questionnaire. Then await return of the questionnaire, and then tabulate questionnaire responses. I mean, you take those responses and you push it out in a fashion where it is easily followable, runnable, analyzable, and then you take all of that data and put it in a report form for people to understand. While the steps sound simple, it can be challenging because the tasks might be embedded in a document. So in that case, sometimes people maintain versions of the document, and you maintain what we call a version control. Okay. Then figure 3-7 also shows you tasks, their description, and the duration, and the predecessor, and the whole 9 yards about. Then you need to estimate your task duration. And the task duration is measured in what we call person days. What is the difference between a day and a person day? Day is 24 hours and a person day is 8 hours. So a person day represents the work that one person can complete in a day, and a person day is 8 hours. This approach, however, can present some problems. For example, if it will take one person 20 days to perform a particular task, it might not be true that two people could do the same task in 10 days. And when we say 10 days, we are talking about 10 person days. So 10 person days is equivalent to how many weeks? 10 person days is equal to how many weeks?
2 business weeks.
2 business weeks. Exactly. Exactly. So that's what basically how you have to calculate things. So it's pretty much like if 4 painters can paint a room in an hour, 40 of them will not paint it in 6 minutes. That's basically how things don't work that way. So that's why you need to figure out a good medium of where to do what. That's why a lot of the developers, in order to meet the deadline, what do they have to do? They have to work outside of the person days, and they have to maybe put in time over the weekends, or work after hours, code more than a person day in a day, and things of that nature. So project managers usually use a weighted formula for estimating the duration of each task. The project manager first makes 3 estimates for each task. One is an optimistic approach, which is the best case scenario. One is a probable case estimate, and one is the most pessimistic or the worst case estimate. The manager then assigns a weight to each one of them. The weight can vary, but common approach is to use a ratio. Best ways is 1, and W, which is the worst case, is 1, and the probable case 4. So this is basically what it looks like. B plus 4P plus W over 6. Why 6? Because there are 6 units. 1 for B, 1 for W, 4 for P. Total 6. So it averages it out. For example, a project manager might estimate the file conversion task could be completed in 20 days, or could take as many as 34, but most likely will be done in 24. So 20 becomes the best scenario, 34 becomes the worst scenario, and 24 becomes the probable scenario. Plugs it into the equation, and it comes out that estimate 25 days. Okay, so that's what this work breakdown structure does, allows you to break things down and then be able to estimate things accordingly. Factors affecting the duration. When developing duration estimates, managers consider 4 things or 4 factors. Number 1, a project size. Number 2, human resources. Number 3, experience with similar projects, because that's a learning curve, and then a constraints. Okay. For example, last week when you were solving your beloved normalization activities, right, Greg? So you notice that over the progression of those, you were getting a little bit of a grasp on it compared to what you did the first one.
I have another class after this, Saad. Please don't give me a headache.
I have a solution. Anyway, so that's what it is. Over the period of time, you allocate experience, and then you can utilize those in other projects. So project size, again, you have limited resources, and within the limited budget, you need to work with those limited resources. But in developing an estimate, the project manager must time for meetings too, project reviews, training, and any other factors that could affect the productivity of the development team. So do not project optimistically or pessimistically. Probable approach is the best idea. Like, oh, I expect everybody to work 8 hours. I expect everybody to put in their 40 hours and maybe go beyond that. Nobody will ever get sick. Nobody will have their vacations planned. Not considering the meeting times, not considering any other time, It's just doing things as if you're living in utopia. That is an extremely wrong estimate. Initially, it will make clients very happy. Oh my God, you can do this project in 3 months. Other people said they can't complete it in less than 5 or 4 months. Wow, that's pretty cool. And deep down, 3 months is probably the most optimistic approach, and pessimistic would be 6. So 4 to 5 months is a good probable approach that others have estimated it to be. So do not go for that. Human resources. Companies must invest heavily in cutting edge technology to remain competitive in a connected world. So skilled IT professionals or learned and educated people in the area that they're serving, train them, send them for training, encourage them to learn, encourage them to improve, come back and apply the skills that you have learned. Things of different reasons, okay? After a project gets underway, the project manager must deal with turnovers, job vacancies, and escalating salaries, as I told you earlier. The project manager also has to accommodate official holidays, family emergencies, and other events that may affect the schedule. A project manager can develop time and cost estimates based on the resources used for similar projects in the past. The experience method works best for small to medium size, but for massive projects, that may not be a good yardstick. Constraints, as explained in the previous chapter during the preliminary investigation phase, where constraint is basically a condition that causes a hindrance in progress, which could include time, dollar, or people. A project manager must define system requirements that can be achieved realistically. However, if constraints are present, the project manager must adjust other resources or change the scope of the project. Cannot do it by herself or himself, has to do it through some kind of a formalized process. So coming back to work breakdown structure. Here is a work breakdown structure of some of the tasks we saw earlier. So here we come up with some days like reserving the meeting room, order the marketing material, and so on and so forth. Everything has X number of days allocated to it. That's step number 1 done. So accordingly, we can lay these steps out and create a Gantt chart. But now these needs to be in a pattern, right? So there has to be a task pattern. In any project, large or small, tasks depend on each other. So there must be a predecessor task and there must be a successor task. What will happen before this and what will happen after this? Therefore, a task box is created. In this task box, we have 5 sections. We need to write the name of the task at the top. We need to put the start date, the end date, the task ID, and the number of days it will take for this task to be completed. So these are the different components of the task. Now, these tasks have different types of patterns, or task patterns have different types. One of them is called the dependent task. Means in order for this task to be completed, another task has to be completed prior to this one. So in this case, author gives you a very good example where a runner must pass it on to the next runner in a relay race to go to the next step. Otherwise, this person is waiting. So for example, in order for you to create the document, you need the outline. And the outline itself will be done in 5 days. So until the 6th day, you cannot get the outline. So the first week of the project, for example, you don't have documents done, or you have not even started working on the documents because you're still in the outline phase. But when you go into the document creation phase, here you have total of 9 days, 9 business days. And this is the 6th business day of the project to 14th business day of the project. Sometimes it happens so that a project may yield multiple successors, or a step may yield multiple successors. So for example, developing a plan, which will take 30 days, after which 2 processes will start simultaneously. One is to arrange interview, and one will be to design survey. So designing survey team is working independently of arranging interview people, and the interview will take 30 days, but the survey will be done before that. So that's okay. Okay. Or it is possible that there are two predecessors. One predecessor is obtain authorization. Another predecessor is create job description. Which of the predecessor will be done first? Which of the predecessor will be done first?
The job description.
The job description. Why?
The duration is shorter and it's projected to finish on an earlier day.
Exactly. So can I start working on conducting interviews because one of the predecessor is done? No, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. So that's why the conducting of the interview starts on the 16th day, not day number 6. So both predecessors have to be completed for the task to move on to the next level. Okay. Working with complex task patterns. So we have one pattern where we have one dependent task, or we may have a complicated pattern where we have one and then splits into two, which splits into two, and at times you have parallel tasks running simultaneously. To this form, where you have tasks 3 and 4 running simultaneously, but 4 is running while 5 and 6 are running, and 4 is running while 7 is running, or maybe 4 is done, but 8 cannot start until 5, 6, and 7 are done. So that's what basically you need to pay attention to as well. Okay. The critical path. Critical path is basically the series of tasks that has the most number of days on it. So that's the path. So for example, if you look at this simple diagram, which path has the most number of days? Is it 1, 2, 3, 5, or 1, 2, 4, 5? Which path has the most number of days?
The bottom one.
The bottom one, right? So the bottom one will be considered as my critical path, that I need at least these many days before I can complete this. So your critical path will be calculated like this: 10 plus 30 plus 25 plus 30. That's the duration of the project. So that's my critical path. 1, 2, 4, 5. So 10 plus 30 is 40. 40 plus 25 is 65. Plus 30 is 95 days. Oops. Task 3, on the other hand, is called what? Slack time. It could be delayed up to 20 days and you will still be fine. Okay. Before we go to project monitoring control, okay. So we will assign you in a breakout room a Sunrise software case in point 3.1. So make a note of that. That is page number 79. Page 79, case in point 3.1, Sunrise software. Okay, here you guys go. Okay, looks like everybody is back. So let's look at room number 1. Brock, Caden, Ezra, and Greg. Your room.
So I guess we're trying to understand like how the person days divides into actual working days. So when we were looking at it, I'm sorry, say it again.
Person day is a working day.
Right, so 8 hours.
Yes.
So we were kind of okay, so we kind of calculated this. So we were thinking eight total days per person instead of 8 hours.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Essentially what we were looking at was, I mean, obviously we understood that wrong. The idea that the programmers on the project think it doesn't matter is not correct. But the system analyst saying that it's ridiculous to think any combination would work is also incorrect. Because let's say there's a few things that aren't known. What's the scope of the project that needs done, and what's the timeline that it needs to be done in? At least that's from what I could tell off of what we were reading. I guess we estimated it could take about anywhere between 10 to 15 people to do it if it's like a project that needs to be done in like 100 days, give or take.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Room 2, Alex, Jared, Ronald, and Victor.
So.
Yeah, so
when
we
were-
talked about,
Oh. Go ahead,
did
Victor.
you want to speak?
You can go.
So we talked about how there is a benefit in many ways to have more people, but you have to look at context because you can't have like, 50 developers on one program.
Mhm.
You need to look at how many people you can efficiently have. And even with that, I don't think that you'd get like twice the efficiency from 2 people because they have to communicate and they're not going to work perfectly together, but you might get close. And the more people you add, the more efficiency you might lose.
Yeah, there are a lot of other factors, yes, which could be a constraint to efficiency just by simply adding more resources. Okay. Room 3, Angela, Christopher, Mason, and Santos.
So what we talked about was basically, it, not any combination will necessarily work, but there are combinations that would work. And just because you have 100 people to work on a project in one day that would be done, doesn't mean that it will, that'll work that way, because you could have 25 tasks and now you have 100 people trying to get all those tasks done in one day. And those tasks may take different times, and they have the, some may take longer than others. And then we talked about how like at school, we have prerequisites. And you can't take a certain class until you like advanced RPG until you have the first RPG class. And it kind of works the same way with the projects.
Okay. Okay. Room 4, Emka, Oscar, and Tatiana.
Well, I had said that I agree with the system analysis because there are like different factors that can go into what can be done at any given time. So like if there might be part of the project that needs to be done first before you can even think about doing a different part of the project. So it doesn't really equal like one person, one work day necessarily.
Okay. I see. So with that, I would like you guys to go back to the unit number 2 and scroll down, and you will find towards the bottom of unit number 2 a folder called Chapter 3 Items. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
I can see it.
Okay, awesome. Now, when you go in that, I want you to click on the very first link that says Work Breakdown Structure or WBS Examples. This has several different examples of work breakdown structure, and clicking on any example, it does gives you a full example as well, okay? So we have how many examples here in this document?
8.
8, okay? So when you guys join the breakout rooms, do you also know which room number you are in?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Just wanted to make sure because it was some
Yeah.
time ago we started joining breakout rooms as
Last
fast.
time I was in room 12.
I was in 3.
Okay, cool. So we will put you guys in 6 breakout rooms. So room number 1, or sorry, 8, there are 8 of them, right? So we're gonna put you guys in 4 breakout rooms where each room will take 2 items out of this list. So room number 1 will take the first 2 and study them and discuss them. Room 2 will take 3 and 4. Room 3 will take 5, 6, and room 4 will take 7, 8. Everybody got it?
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to set aside, again, 15 minutes for you to open, look at the work breakdown structure for the 2 examples that is assigned to your room, and then maybe talk a little bit about it, and then we'll come back. Working on the first 2 examples in WBS.
So with the examples, we knew the first one was the construction of a house, and there was 3 main components to level 2, which was the internal, the foundation, and the external. And with Greg's expertise, we were able to understand that the foundation must come first. And we also got a list of the work and the budget, so the work percent needed at that time. Therefore, it gave us information to let us know that how many people we probably should hire on at this time at this phase. And then continue to do that, and whether increase the workflow or decrease it depending on how much that work percent was.
Awesome. Now, one more thing. In work breakdown structure, the numbering given not necessarily means the sequence.
Right.
Okay, cool. But one thing you guys probably would notice that somebody with a little bit of background information was helpful.
Absolutely, yes. When
Right.
Greg chimed in on that, that helped out a lot.
That's exactly is itself is a big proof that when you are working on projects and the people working on a project has some prior knowledge of similar project, that can certainly make things easier for everybody. So, okay, let's go to your second example, market research.
That one I still am iffy on myself, but I'll let somebody else explain that.
Okay, within your group. Okay, who else wants to come forth?
But the way I kind of looked at it is like the first one was like your rough draft, and then it gets approved, and then the second step was like your final draft, and then you put it into planning, or then you put it into execution, and then after that, once execution is done, you close it out. That's the way I looked at it. And then within your rough draft and your final draft, you can kind of shift and mold your needs as you go, and you learn a little more about what you're doing. That was my take on it, at least.
So you're taking, like, in the initiation phase was divided into 2 steps. One was where you were requirement gathering and analyzing step, and the other one was once you do that, you're taking it and turning it into a business case. So basically, initiation phase is chapter 1, and the business case is chapter 2. So that's what basically the initiation phase is, basically chapters 1 and 2. And then you are taking it into the planning phase where you're looking at the scope statement, and you're now looking at chapter 3 where you look at the work breakdown structure and so on and so forth. And then the later chapters in the book are basically the execution phase and the closeout phase.
Yeah, kind of like designing a website. You do your wireframe, and then you move on to your next step, and you do your rough draft, and then you move on to the third, and you complete all of it, and then your fourth step is your final checks before you submit it.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Let's move on to room 2. Alex, Brock, and Tatiana. You had 2 examples as well. The first one was wastewater treatment.
Yeah, so basically, that kind of goes hand in hand. Actually, both of ours kind of go hand in hand with the first example that group 1 had, where it's all basically construction and the planning phases. And me, I have construction experience, so I understand the different phases that go into both the planning and construction of any kind of project. The wastewater and treatment plan was a little bit more um obscure than the actual commercial construction plan. With the breakdown of, you know, like the landscaping prior to that, the getting the insurance, getting the prints done. But yeah, explaining, you know, the early phases of it, you got to have the actual plan in place to actually get the construction started. You got your engineers making your blueprints, you got your project managers figuring out the workflow, how many people are needed, how many phases are needed. And just like everything goes in a specific order, certain things have to be done first before the next thing can be done, such as the groundwork and everything, and then building the actual structure itself, and then the finalizing of completing the projects.
Okay. Nice. Again, we had a little bit of an advantage because somebody had an exposure, right? Okay. So let's move to room number 3. Angela, Caden, Ronald, and Santos. Your first one was an engineering project plan, and the second one was an infrastructure deployment. So what is your take on this?
I would say, you know, just looking at the workflow and kind of like just see how the time framing of it and um the cost and how many people individuals you would need. Same thing, you know, the engineering project, you know, I have an extensive background within construction, so I can kind of gauge it out. And, you know, the person that's going to be in it, you know, distributor or that's going to take on this project, the main guy is going to know because he's going to have the experience on how many individuals is needed for a job like this and how in a time frame. The other thing is like you rather have more wiggle room than be at a tight schedule. So like if you're gonna, let's just say for example, we're looking at number 3 and just guessing because I don't, you know, we didn't have enough time to go through all the nitty gritty. But number 3 is let's just say that took an hour. Well, then you're gonna probably just say everything takes an hour. So then it gives you a wiggle room and you're not going back to the guy that wants you to do the project. You're not gonna go back to him and say, hey, we can't complete it in this time frame because within contracts, you know, you sign there's time frames and deadlines that have to get met. And if you don't meet those deadlines within that contract, you get penalized, the company, and now you're looking at thousands of dollars that you can be fined for not completing it on the time, not completing the project, that point of the project within that deadline time.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So again, you know, somebody with a little bit of a background, right? A lot of people have construction background in this class, right? Okay, moving on to the room 4, Christopher, Jared, and Oscar. You guys had 2 of them. When one was moving an office, the other one was planning a trade show.
Well, see, I have a background in moving places, so
Nice.
so as we were looking at it, first of all, I think the thing that came out to us a lot at first is that there is a lot of bureaucratic stuff and red tape that goes into even moving in the first place. Because the actual move itself is almost at the very end. There's so much more you have to worry about, like figuring out budgets, finding the new offices, which means contacting realtors, viewing potential sites, and looking through them, figuring out what's within your budget. Then you got to figure out the floor plan. How are you going to want things laid out? What kind of new technologies are you going to be implementing into this new office? Then you got to figure out where we'll all fit, and then you got to train everyone in it after the move has happened, and you got to let the employees know it's happening so they can prepare. So there's a lot that goes into moving an office. And then the other one, planning a trade show. Like just getting to the trade show seems like the seems to be the easy part. It's setting up the trade show that seems to take a lot. A lot of planning goes into it. It's probably the most intricate of all of them, with how much stuff needs to be set up, with setting up schedules, budgets, sending in applications, figuring out what you even want to be doing at the trade show, figuring out what kind of message you want, choosing your stand size and such, planning your layouts, ordering the furniture you're going to need, ordering anything else that you may need, preparing displays to kind of show off what your business is trying to do, and figuring out what kind of stuff you're going to be selling, figuring out what kind of materials you're going to need for that, and those kinds of things.
Cool, cool. So that's good. And planning a trade show? Any exposure? Anybody like, because has any one of you been to trade shows?
A
I've
trade
been-
show?
I've been to
I've been
one
to
of
a
those
trade show
fish things.
once. I didn't like it.
Okay, okay.
What's a trade show?
Well, I don't know if this qualifies as a trade show, but when I was back into fish and breeding fish, there was this Greater Chicago Cichlid Association. You go down there, they have a table set up with a bunch of different tropical fish and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
pretty
like,
cool.
yeah, or a car show, or like a game. I mean, like some kind of a display show.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing, Brock. I didn't know what a trade show was.
I'm like,
I'm what is it?
trade show. I was like, you mean like a swap meet?
I said, yeah, I've been to 7 Mile Fair a few times.
Yeah.
Like a convention.
Yeah, like a convention, right? So, I mean, like there's a lot of planning in place that you have to, in terms of, getting the area and the number of people coming in and the setup, and you need the X amount of items to be there, and you have to house it accordingly. And if you are or I mean, like if food will be provided, then you need to contact food vendors and make sure that different variety of food is available. And then you have to do a lot of housekeeping stuff related to that. So all of that goes into planning a trade show. So different kinds of projects can take advantage of project management skills. It's just not like something very, very IT oriented. So that was another thing I wanted you to associate this. It's something similar across the board when it comes to planning and executing what you're planning, but that's what it is. How about let's take a break here till 1:50. When we come back at 1:50, there are some more resources that we will tap into while we look at the remaining half of the chapter. So I will see you guys at 1:50. So we will now start from section 3.6. This is where we stopped before we went to the breakout sessions. So reporting, as members of the project team, they need to regularly report on the progress, and project manager then takes up all this and takes it to the next level and reports it to the manager or other stakeholders. So the manager decides which information needs to be passed along, prepares a summary, and moves it on to the next level, because people at the next level have so many feedbacks to get. So nobody, I mean, like no one person can take so much of their time. So when we talk about the project status meeting, these are short. If it is an agile meeting, that may happen like in the morning, 15 minutes. But overall, the status meetings are pretty short, pretty concise. And the project managers get the whole idea of what's going on, and then takes next set of actions accordingly. A project manager must report regularly to his or her immediate supervisor upper management and users. Although a progress report might be given verbally to an immediate supervisor, reports to management and users are usually given something in written form. So when we were talking about earlier that project managers often have to also deal with or handle potential problems, and that at times can be difficult. At what point should management be informed about any kind of problems? At one extreme, we have project managers, as I told you, who would alert management for every little thing. And on the other end, we have those people who are on the extreme that they will not tell a single thing until everything goes hayway. So that's why it's important for you to keep some kind of a medium approach based on where you have been placed, so the management can take a better course of action. As far as the project management software are concerned, there are quite a few in the market, and one of them is Microsoft Project. And this book shows you several different aspects of Microsoft management software. And this is where I would like you guys to go back to chapter 3 items list. And the third link inside chapter 3 items, which is a Gantt chart in MS Office. When you click on this link, it will take you to a tutorial. And I want you to watch this tutorial on your computers.
Were you an IT ad?
And give me a green check when you guys are done.
Where was that again?
It is under that chapter 3 items under unit 2, the same folder where you went to look at the WBS examples. So under unit number 2, towards the very bottom, chapter 3 items.
Oh,
And Gantt chart in MS Project, that link.
gotcha.
Okay, so now we will move on to page number 92, where it talks about different things. Some of these things we have already talked about, and some of these things are new. For example, we have already spoken about work breakdown structure. We already spoke about what is Gantt chart. Also, network diagram is a new thing, which is after the Gantt chart is completed, the data can be viewed in the form of a Microsoft project network diagram, which is similar to PERT chart. When a network diagram option is selected, the project tasks, dependencies, and start and finish dates for each tasks are shown. Similarly, you have a calendar view where everything is then can be displayed in a calendar. Okay, so those are some other views available to you. That's why on the inside this folder, which is chapter 3 items, I've given you a link for network diagram examples. And these network diagrams would look something like these, like you have a bunch of activities start till end. And there are some examples like this one, where you start out with, and then it tells you the number of days you will spend on this item, and then what will be the successor of this item, and all of that stuff. That's basically what is spread out in this network diagram. Okay, now moving on to the risk management, which is section 3.8. Every IT project involves risks that systems analysts and project managers must address. So risk is something that can happen, has not yet happened. So there is a potential of it happening. So you need to have some risk management in place. Although project management experts differ with regard to the number of steps or phases, a basic list of risk management tasks would include some kind of a risk management plan, risk identification, qualitative risk analysis. So you may have to figure out if this risk occurs, will it have more impact, or will it have less impact? Is it a low impact risk or a high impact risk? So you may have to put it on this matrix of risk matrix. So it is more occurring, but it has less impact. Less occurring, but if it occurs, it has more impact. Or if it is less occurring, but has less impact. It occurs a lot, and every time it occurs, it creates a mass impact. So all of these things need to be addressed and talked about here. The quantitative risk analysis is to understand the actual impact in terms of, will it affect in terms of money? Will it affect in terms of project scope, time, quality? Which factor of the project will this be affecting? Accordingly, there should be a risk response plan in place, which is a proactive effort to anticipate a risk and describe an action plan to deal with it. Then you need to constantly monitor for risks. Moving on to managing for success. Project management is a challenging task. Project managers must be alert, technically competent, and highly resourceful. Unfortunately, projects can and do get derailed for a wide variety of reasons. When problems occur, the project manager's ability to handle the situation becomes a critical factor. If the project is a trouble because of lack of resources or organizational support, management might be willing to give the project more commitment and higher priority, so they can make decisions as to how they would want to go in this route. To be successful, an information system must satisfy business requirements, stay within budget, be completed on time, and most important of all, be managed effectively. Okay, now let's go back to that same folder, which is chapter 3 items. And here is a WBS network chart, Gantt chart, schedule, several things put together in one place. This is an individual activity. So I want individually you guys to go over this and then give me a green check when you guys are done reviewing this. It is the last item under chapter 3 items. Don't forget to give me a green check when you guys are done. Okay, cool. Awesome. So everybody got this. Now let me put you guys in a breakout room again for you to go over the case in point 3.3, which is on page number 95. So let me show you again so that everybody knows that we were talking about managing for success. And right at the bottom of that page, we have the Brooks Law. Adding more people to project actually might increase the time necessary to complete the project because of a principle called Brooks Law. Right at the bottom of that page, we have case in point 3.3. So let me open the breakout rooms here. This time, we will give you guys 10 minutes and we will create 3 rooms. And here we go. So let's see, room 1. Alex, Caden, Ezra, Greg, and Santos.
Yeah, we talked about how adding new people to a project, especially late in the game, takes probably more time than you'll save. You have to get them up to speed. And then you need more communication, and it really depends on the context. If you're waiting on something outside of the company's control, adding more people isn't going to do anything for you.
Okay, cool. Room 2, Emka, Jared, Oscar, and Ronald. And I believe, Angela, you were also in room 2, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is you guys' take on it?
So pretty much just adding more people when we're already behind and we're already like far into the project. you'll have to train them and like help them understand what's happening, and that'll take a lot of time, and that'll just slow everything down because you're waiting on them to learn as you're doing the project.
Okay, let's move to the last room. Brock, Chris, Tatiana, and Victor.
Yeah, pretty much the same. Like having to explain new people to get caught up. The new people might not understand the process that everyone else went through. And communication can be a really big hang up with having new people. Or with having more people, I should say. The more people involved, the whole too many cooks in the kitchen is the way I could put it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so we are now going back here to the next item in line, which would be business issues. The major objective of every system is to provide a solution to a business problem or opportunities. However, there are problems that may occur when the information system does not meet the business requirement. It causes several problems. And these could result from either in the earlier stages, people were not clear about the requirements. Whatever they foreseeably saw was not really what the client really wanted them to do. They set targets for themselves which were not achievable in the time frame and the resources that they thought they would be able to achieve it. So there are several factors that could contribute to businesses having problem. And here, one of them is budget issues, which is unrealistic estimates, failure to develop accurate forecasts, when you will be able to deliver what. As a result, you may run into problems. Now, what happens in some of the corporations that, let's say Apple, releasing the new iOS, they have a deadline to meet, and of course, they run into a lot of problems behind the scene. So in order to meet the deadline, not to disappoint the people, they sometimes might have to scale down a few features or not release it 100%, and then they release the product. So usually the features that you thought we will talk about afterwards are the features, even if you hold back, no one will notice. And when the first release comes out after extensive testing, people run into problems, people start complaining, and right away you get to solving those problems. But now is the time to not only just solve the problems, but also to release those held back updates so that the users feel like it's not like, well, I'm just getting my problems fixed. Rather, I'm also getting new things. The new things were always part of the original plan. It's just like they were to be released in steps. So anytime they feel like, oh my God, the excitement is going down. So let's release another update with excitement. And at the same time, we have to keep in mind that consumers have to continuously buy our products so we can tell them, you know what, this feature will only work on iOS 13 and up. So anybody who is out of luck would either upgrade or will be like, okay, I will just live with whatever I have until and unless I'm ready or whenever I'm ready to move on to the next level. So the bottom line is that, yes, there are budget issues, so you have to carefully plan around it. And these could occur because of poor monitoring, schedule delays, human resources issues. You had to hire somebody for which you had to pay a lot more than the previous person in that position. Also, and there are scheduling issues, problem with timetables and project milestones that could also result in project failure. If the project manager fails to plan, fails to staff, organize, supervise, communicate, motivate, evaluate, direct, and control, all of these things, if is lacking in any of these areas, that could affect the project. Okay. As you started to notice things in this project, you would notice that it's not just about staffing and planning and organizing. It is also about evaluating. It is also about controlling. It is also about supervising and at times motivating. Different employees get motivated differently. So you have to play around to make sure that you are able to press the right buttons to motivate people. Anyway, having said that, we will now move on to our question of ethics portion. And for this one, we will use a bit of larger groups versus smaller groups. So let me recreate the breakout rooms. For 15 minutes, where you will discuss the question of ethics and then come back and report on it.
What page was that on?
96.
Okay.
Okay, so now that everybody is back, let's look at room 1.
One.
Yeah, we're room 1. Yep.
Okay. So, when it comes to the ethical question of it, we had a couple questions involving the situation. So it said that she seemed like her job was on the line. Now, was her job on the line because this was a big project, or was her job on the line because this was a constant problem that she had? And if this is a constant problem, like I don't know how I'd feel about working through it all the time, like doing these crunch hours of potentially 60 hours a week, you know, taking time away from my family, from a manager that's doing a poor job of managing her team repeatedly. So we discussed that. We also discussed that if not bringing it up would potentially be worse, because if we don't meet this deadline and the bosses are like talk to her like, hey, like you knew 3 weeks ago this wasn't going to happen, why didn't you say something sooner? That could also potentially cause problems. And it could also, if we don't report this, backfire on the team, because if they look at it, it's like, oh, the manager and their team didn't get this job done, so it could reflect poorly on everyone involved, which is unfair to the team who has been trying to get it done but wasn't sure if they would have time or not. So
Oh, awesome. Very good points. Very, very good points. Room 2.
Does anybody else want to talk?
So I mean, we didn't think about that part about you know, how often has this been an issue? We were more focused on like the how to navigate actually bringing up the issues. So if pretty much if there was a significant problem to be reported to management, instead of jumping over the chain of command, just bring it to her directly and then just kind of suggest, or not make suggest, but like kind of offer ways like, how can here's an issue. Yeah, it should be pushed up, but to mitigate having to even do that, what can we do to help to keep that from even being an issue? Can the problem be solved before it has to get brought up?
And I think also too, like if we talked about how instead of thinking about just the person who was worried about her career, who was at risk, the whole team, are there things that other members of the team or that I can do or we can do that can make this work? And if we need to bring it up, like how do we bring it up? And we talked about those different ways that would be appropriate without stepping on too many toes or hurting having a negative effect.
Okay, cool. Anybody else from your room?
Yeah, the one thing too that Angela mentioned, which I thought really stuck with me also, was going about it in a very positive way, showing like team player mentality when bringing it up to this upper management, leveling with them in a way that makes it so that they understand and you can convey a message much easier to them.
Cool. Very, very unique points. Both of your rooms brought some very good, unique points. Okay, now let's get to our last item for the day. Okay, or last two items of the day, rather. Okay. One of them is that unit number 2, that's where your chapter 3 assignment and chapter number 3 quiz are available. Chapter 4 is what we will work on next week. And so chapter 3 assignment, chapter 4 assignment, chapter 3 quiz, chapter 4 quiz, all of them together are due in 2 weeks. Anybody who is behind on unit 1, the deadline is tonight. So you must turn in all the unit work stuff by the end of the day today. And presentations, that's the second item I want to talk about. So the Excel spreadsheet that I shared with you guys. So these are the people that will be going next week. Santos, Ronald, and Christopher.
Thanks, Saad. You're the best.
And people are on the standby. So the presentations will be towards the end of the class time. So we will dedicate the last hour or so towards the presentation. So the presentation length is 5 to 7 minutes, and then we will leave some room for anybody to ask any kind of questions or have a little bit of an open discussion, goods, improvements, and a little bit of that. And then like that, we will go one person at a time. Anyway, so that's basically the schedule.
Does the presentation can the presentation be about somebody or?
Presentation can be anything that you want to talk about. Okay. So as the presentation guidelines stated, that it is on the topic of your choice. I don't know who you want to talk about, but hopefully, you know, I mean, like, it's somebody appropriate, right? Don't.
Oh,
don't-
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Didn't you say Saad, Chris? You said you wanted to talk about Saad. You were going to do a
Yeah.
presentation on Saad, right?
Otherwise, somebody coming up and talking about, I want to talk about Shakira today. No. No. So, yeah. Okay.
I take it you like Shakira, huh, Saad?
No, I have no likes and dislikes. I don't even know her. It's just like, you know, I know that.
Well, none of us know her, to be fair, but you can still like her or dislike her.
Yeah, I don't know much about to say that statement. All I know was that
This
not
brings
good,
up some ethical questions.
not some good things came out related to Super Bowl. I don't know.
That wasn't with Shakira. That was with the other one.
Oh, was that the other one?
Yeah.
Oh,
Janet
I don't know.
Jackson, come on, guys.
Yeah, Janet, thank you.
Oh,
That
that
wasn't
was
even her fault.
Janet. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
I
come
don't-
on, Angela. She's not that important anymore.
Anymore.
Yeah, anymore.
Was she important at some point in time? Then she became unimportant?
I think so.
Okay,
For someone, I'm sure.
okay, okay. You know, bringing up all the drama Britney Spears is going through. That kind of stuff. We you know, that kind of stuff. We don't, it just should be like something more. It's open, but within bounds. Okay. Any other questions? Chris, you can talk about your cars.
Yeah, no.
But
Maybe.
remember to time yourself, whatever you're putting together, make sure it is nicely done. Don't go with too much information. Just time yourself.
Okay.
And do not use presentation slides to read from. You can use pictures, little bit of text. You should talk more than rely on the material.
Gotcha. So like be ready, kind of like not read off of like.
Yeah, don't read off the slides.
Okay.
Don't read off any piece of paper. That's why I kept it an open topic,
Gotcha.
something that you like, so that you have some knowledge about it, and you do not need to rely on resources to talk about it.
Think of it more like bullet points to remind you of certain thing to talk about.
Yeah,
Each slide.
right. And do not put too much stuff on the slide. That's something that I'm emphasizing over and over again, because that's the biggest problem when you pick a topic of your choice. You just want to talk about it, like you want to tell people what you like, and it's fine, but we're bound by time limit. Okay,
All right.
cool. Have a good one, everybody.